And so the band of plotters has started to assemble. And on the 20th of May, 1604, the five plotters, Catesby, Fawkes, Winter, Percy and John Wright, met for the first time at the Duke and Drake pub in the Strand. And on the 9th of June, Northumberland, still unaware of the plot, and remember he was going to be regent if the plot succeeded, unaware of the plot, appointed Thomas Percy to the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen of Arms, the 50-strong unit of the King's bodyguard. And so one of the plotters now is one of the bodyguards to the King. Now this gives him a reason to rent a house in London, and he got Guido Fawkes to pretend to be his servant, using the convincing false name of John Johnson, at his house. Gunpowder was to be stored in Catesby's house in Lambeth. Now, they would row the barrels across the river at night. And on October 1604, Robert Keyes joins the plot. He's a debtor, but very well connected socially. He accidentally, however, lets slip about the plot to his servant, Thomas Bates. I mean, the man is a fool. If you're plotting against the government, you've got to keep it quiet. He lets the plot slip as he's chatting in his house, but thankfully for him, Thomas Bates is also a Catholic sympathiser and joins the plot as well. However, the plot is now starting to grow and grow and grow. And if you're really to succeed in this kind of terrorist outrage, small groups are essential, and already is quite a large group of people plotting. But then disaster, plague, strikes London. It's announced that the opening of Parliament will be delayed from February 1605 to the 3rd of October 1605. Now the plotters start to dig a tunnel underneath the palaces of Westminster to put the gunpowder in so they can blow up the House of Parliament. But none of them have any mining experience whatsoever. Now, at this time, obviously the current building of the House of Parliament haven't been built yet, and so the House of Parliament at this time are a warren of medieval rooms, undercrofts, and merchants' chambers. On the 25th of March, 1605, 3 more people join the plot. Robert Winter, a rich Catholic landowner, Christopher Wright, another ex-Essex rebel. Remember, these ex-Essex rebels were watched closely by the government. They're not the best people to involve in a plot. And John Grant, who is also an ex-Essex rebel and married to Robert Winter's sister. Now, they then hire an undercroft from a man called John Wynyard. And this undercroft is underneath the Houses of Parliament, so they don't have to worry about digging this tunnel, which they're making, if they've made any progress at all, really very bad progress. So they hire from a man called John Wynyard an undercroft under the House of Parliament. But he's an interesting man. He's keeper of the King's wardrobe, an important government post, and a close friend to the King's First Minister, the equivalent of the Prime Minister, I suppose, Robert Cecil. And so the government now lend them an undercroft underneath the House of Parliament. It's underneath the House of Lords, and it used to be the palace's medieval kitchens. The plotters moved 20 barrels of gunpowder in, and then 16 more on the 20th of July. On the 28th of July, due to the ongoing problems with plague in the city, the opening of Parliament is again delayed until the 5th of November. And so that key date, has finally started to appear in the plans. In late August 1605, Fawkes and Winter discover that all the barrels of gunpowder had decayed and were completely useless. And so they have to bring in more gunpowder underneath the House of Parliament and then stack firewood in front of the barrels to hide them. And then 3 more plotters are recruited. Ambrose Rookwood, Sir Everard Digby, who'd been knighted by James I in 1603, so there's gratitude for you. And he was brought in as a rich man because they'd run out of money. I know this sounds crazy, that they'd run out of money to pay the rent for the undercroft, and so they had to recruit Sir Edward Digby to borrow money off him to pay the rent for the undercroft. This is not a well-planned plot. And part of the problem is that Percy had forgotten to pay the rent. And finally, Francis Tresham, who will be important. So remember the name, Francis Tresham, who was Catesby's cousin. In October 1605, the plan is finalised. Guido Fawkes would light the fuse, and then escape across the River Thames. The rest would raise rebellion, a Catholic rebellion in the Midlands, and capture the king's daughter. Guido Fawkes would then go abroad and explain what had happened to the European Catholic powers. The plotters, however, were starting to get cold feet about the plan, especially many of their wives worried about the Catholic MPs who would be in the House of Commons, who they knew socially, while Percy was worried about the still unaware Northumberland. What if he went to the opening of Parliament? And so they were concerned about some of their mates. On the 26th of October, someone wrote a warning letter to Lord Monteagle, a member of the government. It was probably written by Francis Tresham, as he was his brother-in-law. And here we have the wording of the letter. My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care for your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament, for God and man have concerned to punish the wickedness of this time. And think not slightly of this advertisement, but retire yourself into the country, where may you expect the event in safety. For though there be no appearance of a stir, yet I say they shall receive a terrible blow, this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. Now, if it wasn't Tresham who sent this letter to Monteagle, it could have come from Tresham's wife, a woman called Mary Hobbington, who was very good friends with Monteagle's wife, and so maybe she was trying to spare her friend's husband. Or the letter might even have been a government forgery, if the government knew of the plot, but wanted James I to be credited with understanding the importance of the letter. Now, Monteagle says he didn't understand a word of the letter and gave the letter to Cecil, the Prime Minister, or First Minister. Cecil says that he couldn't understand it either, despite the fact that the man was a Machiavellian genius. He said he couldn't understand it. Monteagle's servant, Thomas, rushed to the plotters, however, as Monteagle's servant was aware of the plot, of course. So Monteagle's servant, Thomas, rushed to the Wright brothers and said, the government have been warned about the plot. And the Wright brothers went and warned Catesby. Now, Catesby was due to go out hunting with the king that day. And this makes us think, quite frankly, Catesby wants the king dead. And he's hunting with the king out there. Stab the man. Just stab him. Why mess about with putting all these barrels of gunpowder in and these plots and all these people trying to send out letters? If you're there in the countryside, on a horse, the king's there on a horse, you're hunting there together, kill the man. But Catesby does not. Catesby goes out hunting, all the while thinking, I'm planning to blow you up. Now, Catesby is warned that the government has been warned. Now, he suspects that Tresham has sent the letter as well, and so questions him, but Tresham's like, no, it's not me, and he manages to convince Catesby and Winter that the letter had not come for him, because he'd said it wasn't, so, it must be true. On the 1st of November, as we get closer to the key date, Cecil claims he still doesn't understand this letter, and shows it to King James I. Now, King James I instantly guesses some stratagem of fire or powder. Now, James I has good reason to fear gunpowder. His father, Lord Darnley, had, after all, been blown up in one of the most extraordinary assassinations of Scottish history. James I's father, Lord Darnley, had been married to Mary, Queen of Scots, an alcoholic waster of a man that we'll discuss more in the third video.